Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Ramble Rousing, the only MTG show that is strictly worse than the other Magic shows you probably watch now. I'm your disambiguous voice host, Ethan, bringing with me another random topic in the world of Magic. So just a timestamp when I'm recording this, just over this past weekend, I played in the Edge of Eternity's pre-release. I did pretty well, 2-1 on the night playing Dimir Control, though, to be honest, I was really happy with the deck that I built for the pre-release, which doesn't happen very often. But while I was playing, I realized what I wanted to talk about in my next Ramble Rousing, which is card evaluation. Well, more specifically, I wanted to talk about how I suck at card evaluation. I actually play a good amount of Limited with my friends, both draft and sealed formats, but I really find that drafting cards and building a deck is insanely hard for me. Most of my struggles come from card evaluation. The idea of choosing the best or even just choosing a good card to give you a better chance at winning. There's a lot to unpack here with just that simple statement, so I figured I would just dive into a few examples from over this weekend to better explain what I mean and some of my struggles. Let's start with Ulthros Scanship. For 3 and a blue, you can draw 2 cards, discard a card, you get an artifact on the field, then eventually you can station it to get an evasive 4/4. At first glance, this was a card that I auto-included for me when I was playing in blue. It has card draw, artifact synergy, which is really important in this set, and a late game creature on paper sounds pretty good for one card. However, it wasn't really until I put the card into practice that I realized it wasn't it. One of my opponents, after the games we played, mentioned to me that this card doesn't really give you any card advantage, but rather card selection, right? Because you play the Scanship, loses you 1 card for casting the spell, you draw 2, so now you are at +1 card, and then you have to discard a card, netting you 0 card advantage. 4 mana is just very costly for what is essentially a Thrill of Possibility effect. The station is also pretty high, and the one game that I did end up playing it, I didn't even really get to station it. Let's compare Scanship to another spaceship that I ran, Pinnacle Killship. When Pinnacle Killship enters, it deals 10 damage to a target creature, basically a 7 mana remove a creature in limited. Station 7 isn't really bad, but since you're going to be dropping it in the late game, trying to station it for Station 7 is pretty costly and takes quite a bit of time, especially if you don't have big creatures. I was able to station this bad boy once by kind of using 2 larger powered creatures, did it in 1 turn. But since I was already ahead in that game, stationing this big late game creature didn't really change the outcome of the game. In short, I think both of these spaceships probably weren't the most useful pick for the deck that I was building. But I took them and ran with them anyways. It's funny because 2 different people on the day of kind of made the same comments about how these cards weren't useful and how I would be able to cut them, but I still took them and ran with them anyways. To compare, let's take a look at some of the cards that I did decide to cut that were hard decisions for me. So cards like Decode Transmission, Scour for Scrap, and Lost in Space. Draw 2, lose 2 is a pretty common black effect. The added void benefit easily justifies the extra 1 mana cost that this can have in a limited environment. I ended up cutting this card due to the fact that I couldn't consistently get that void trigger, even though I was still very tempted by the card draw, and like I said, draw 2, lose 2 is not that bad of a trade, especially on a black card. Scour is a great artifact tutor or recursion that works well in my deck because I had 3 bombs that were all artifacts. But this is a case where I thought the cost of the card was too high to justify its inclusion. To play this card on turn 4, you still need extra mana to cast any of my bombs, even if I were able to tutor them to my hand, and it seemed like too much of an investment to really justify running this card. And then finally, we have a good removal spell in blue, 4 mana bounce a creature, which is a pretty common blue effect, especially in limited formats. We saw it in Final Fantasy. Most likely, if you're bouncing a good creature, this will also make your opponent lose a draw, right? Because they're going to put it back on the top of the library and draw it. They need to spend the mana to recast it. This is a card that I kind of debated on the most, because it's just a really good card for Dimir Control, which is the deck that I was playing. But I decided to cut this card to keep Pinnacle Killship, which is the same removal, just 10 straight up damage to a creature. So that kind of bounces me back to my original topic, right? Did I make the correct choices in keeping certain cards versus cutting the ones that I did? And the results of going 2-1 on the day is still a good stat line in my eyes, but I think the record doesn't show the entire story. I mentioned it earlier, but I didn't really play either of the spaceships that I kept in my decks. Maybe a total of like 3 casts in all my games. And even when I did, they didn't really change the state of the game or turn any of the tides in my favor. So that kind of begs the question, would I have been better off replacing these spaceships for something else? I just don't know. And I think that's the real lackluster end conclusion of this saga. Not only am I a younger player to Magic in general, I also don't have as much experience in Limited as I do, say, a format like Constructed. Obviously, it's hard to decide between these 5 cards in a vacuum. In the light of the entire deck that I created, I would probably have different answers or more concrete answers to my questions. For example, I was already running many low-cost bounce effects. Do I really need another one? Or what if Killship had won me a game single-handedly? Would I have a different opinion of it? Not everyone is going to be judging a limited pre-release deck like this, but I do like to think that the principles stand. The more I play Limited, the more I put my own card evaluation skills to the test. I am skilled enough to say that I am in the bottom 25% in terms of my Limited gameplay and knowledge, but I still love the format because it does ask these card evaluation questions of me and forces me to read the game in a different way. I don't think I'll ever get a good answer as to what cards I should be taking for certain in a limited format or set, but I still really do enjoy asking myself these questions of card evaluation as a player. After all, questions without concrete answers is one of the parts that keeps Magic exciting for me. Hi, this is Endcard Ethan here, swooping in to say thank you for listening to another episode of Ramble Rousing. This topic has been something that's been on my mind for quite a while, even before the Edge of Eternity's pre-release, and I have a lot more to say on this topic in a different context, so that's a little spoiler for you guys on what might be the next episode of Ramble Rousing. But until then, I would like to thank everyone once again for spending a few minutes with me, listening to me speak about this game that I love. If you do enjoy Magic content, please do all the social media things, subscribe, like, comment, follow me on social media. I post every so often about random Magic stuff that is going on in my life. Go check out my shorts. I'm doing a series where I open a bunch of Strixhaven Mystical Archive cards to try to collect them all, because why collect if you're not collecting them all? Am I right? But yeah, thank you guys so much for listening, and stay tuned for more.